I'm Lisa Campo-Engelstein, and I'm delighted to be here sharing this with you today. Thanks for sticking around for the last talk. Okay, so I'm interested in how gender norms shape what medical advances are made and how those medical advances reinforce and reify gender norms. In particular, I explore why certain technologies are not developed despite scientific potential and similar technologies for other populations. Today, I'll be speaking about two such examples, male contraception and clitoris transplant. So we have over a dozen contraceptive methods for cisgender women and only 2 for cisgender men. And scientists have been working on developing male birth control for half a century, but it's always 5 to 10 years away. So what explains this? When most people think of reproduction, they think of pregnant cisgender women, and this strongly contributes to the conflation of reproduction and women. Associating reproduction only with women means that men's reproduction is not a quote unquote understandable category. For instance, whereas most of you, I assume, have heard of gynecology, I bet most of you have not heard of andrology, except for the andrologist here, which is the study of men's reproductive system. The fact that men's reproduction doesn't have much social currency means it's harder to find funding for this, which impedes progress. And this lack of male contraception reinforces this idea that reproduction is only about women. Another reason contributing to the lack of male contraceptives is known as the fertilization fairy tale, in which dominant gender norms are projected onto eggs and sperm, and conception is described as a contest among many sperm to be the knight in shining armor who first reaches the damsel in distress. Anthropomorphizing gametes in this way influences how we understand them. Here I have some language from biology textbooks describing conception. The egg is generally portrayed as passive and therefore easier to control, which is often given as a reason why we have so many more female contraceptives. And in contrast, the sperm are seen as active, which makes them harder to control and therefore harder to develop male contraceptives. Finally, gender also shapes what's considered an acceptable side effect. Women are accustomed to side effects with birth control, such as the ones listed here. Yet these same side effects in new male contraceptives are considered emasculating and therefore unacceptable. So turning to my second topic, in the last decade or so, we've seen huge developments in transplantation of sexual and reproductive organs, including ovary, uterus, penis, and scrotum. Furthermore, cosmetic surgeries on the vulva have increased exponentially, yet there is no discussion of clitoris transplants in the academic literature, nor anywhere else that I looked, including the deep, dark corners of the internet. These disparities in types of surgeries cannot be attributed to demand or need alone, since there are significantly more women who would be eligible for clitoris transplant than for any of these other types of surgeries. So I believe that we have developed certain types of surgeries, at least in part because they uphold dominant gender norms. For instance, real women are moms, so we have transplants to address different types of infertility. We've also developed genital surgeries that will make women more attractive to the male gaze and increase male pleasure. In contrast, male surgeries often focus more on abilities associated with masculinity, such as being able to urinate standing up and sexual prowess. So why don't we have any discussion about clitoris transplant? I think no one's talking about this because no one's comfortable talking about the clitoris. For instance, in everyday language, most people mistakenly refer to women's external genitalia as the vagina, which completely ignores the clitoris. And we don't need to go all the way back to Freud to show that medicine also sidelines the clitoris. For example, medical texts are less likely to label the clitoris, as you can see in this diagram here. This devaluing of women's sexuality and women's sexual pleasure explains why we frequently overlook the clitoris. Due to this virgin whore dichotomy, we often view women's sexuality not just as secondary or passive, but also as bad. In short, clitoris transplants go against dominant gender norms, which is at least partially why no one is talking about them. Awesome. So I have some further questions and I would welcome anyone's feedback on this. So how can we move forward with clitoris transplants and male contraception given this? What other technologies have not been developed? And lastly, how do we minimize the influence of sexism, especially in a very gendered space like sexual and reproductive medicine? Thanks so much.